I'm Aaron Parks. Have you ever wondered what information a Medicaid long-term care caseworker may not be sharing with you? That's a legitimate concern. The official rules and policies leave out some important parts. In this video, I'm going to share with you a little about an Oklahoma Medicaid court case that was decided by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in 2012. This case represents one way that a married couple can achieve immediate Medicaid eligibility. The case was Leroy Morris versus the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, and it dealt specifically with Medicaid eligibility for a married couple, where one spouse requires care, known as the institutionalized spouse, and the other is healthy, known as the community spouse. In 1988, Congress changed the Medicaid rules to allow the community spouse to keep some of a couple's assets and still qualify the institutionalized spouse for Medicaid. This change produced what is known as the Community Spouse Resource Allowance. A second provision in the Medicaid rules states that a type of annuity meeting certain requirements is not counted as an asset. Yet another provision of the rules states that income, unlike assets, is only counted as belonging to the person whose name is on the check. A final provision relevant to the case restricts transfers of assets between spouses. With these things in mind, let's dive into the case. For a married couple, the assets of the couple are evaluated at the time the institutionalized spouse enters into care. After that date, the couple must generally spend a part of their combined assets before the institutionalized spouse can qualify for Medicaid long-term care benefits. The Morrises utilized the annuity rule to spend a portion of their assets on an annuity contract that would pay monthly income to the spouse at home. And by purchasing the contract, they reduced the assets they had to report for Medicaid. They immediately applied for Medicaid. When they did this, the Oklahoma Department of Human Services denied eligibility, and this court case followed. Right off the bat, the 10th Circuit's opinion took issue with how DHS had handled the case, noting that the federal agency charged with administering Medicaid has noted a couple may convert joint resources, which may affect Medicaid eligibility, into income for the community spouse, which does not impact eligibility, by purchasing certain types of annuities. The court said doing so is, quote, not dependent on the community spouse resource allowance provisions. In other words, converting assets into income using an annuity does not affect how much a spouse is entitled to keep under the community spouse resource allowance. The way the rules treat resources is very different than the way they treat income, which is highly relevant to eligibility for married couples. Although all of a couple's countable resources, except the community spouse resource allowance, are treated as available to the institutionalized spouse at the time of an application for benefits, a community spouse's income has no effect on an institutionalized spouse's eligibility. The court determined that for married couples, the purchase of certain annuities may allow the conversion of disqualifying resources into exempt income. In the Morrises case, countable resources totaled $107,812. Calculation of the community spouse resource allowance meant that Mrs. Morris, the Medicaid applicant, had to spend $51,906 to become eligible for Medicaid. Mrs. Morris achieved immediate Medicaid eligibility by purchasing prepaid burial contracts and by using the amount Mrs. Morris was required to spend to purchase an annuity that would pay Mr. Morris $1,140 a month for 3 years. In effect, Mr. Morris was able to keep his community spouse resource allowance of $53,906. Mrs. Morris was allowed to keep a $2,000 resource allowance. The remaining part of the resources was spent on the prepaid burial provisions and the annuity, which provided Mr. Morris with a guaranteed income for 3 years. With the annuity included, the Morrises were able to keep all their assets and still qualify for Medicaid. This video is only a quick summary of the case of Leroy Morris versus the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. The court's opinion, and especially the procedure of implementing these planning options, are very complex and much more than we can cover in a short video. You should also know that the type of annuity involved here is highly specialized and is usually used only for Medicaid eligibility and only at the time of a Medicaid application. In my law practice, I focus on helping people understand and utilize all the rules and the court cases that help them get the best possible outcome on their Medicaid application. There are many tools available to create the best possible outcome on a Medicaid application. Knowing and using all the options can make a huge difference in the financial outcome. And while the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals says this is one of the tools available to you, you won't hear about it from any DHS caseworker.